These people were murdered. 100 children were fucking murdered by imperialist powers who want to tighten their borders, and you're crying about fucking 4 billionaires?
Five rich missing men, and you end up with a multi-million-dollar rescue mission. 750 missing migrants, and they get no rescue, and you have people saying we need to tighten the borders. That is the difference of the discussion being had here.
Yeah, and I think, we can talk about, yes, is the world better because there's a few less millionaires or billionaires? But the point here is not to say, aha, 5 rich people died. Like, that's not the point. I'm not here to laugh about death in that sense. The idea here is that this is the reality of our system. And I mean, we're going to get into a lot of details here, but I think it also holds true to something that I've called in the past the geography of tragedy, which is obviously the missing submersible pod Xbox controller thing happened in the North Atlantic. That's where the Titanic went down. That's very white. The Mediterranean borders Africa, not white enough. So the geography of tragedy, again, like you notice
the people
this
on the boat are not
right
white enough.
You notice this in terms of when there's like a terrorist attack in Africa. Oh, what? If there's a terrorist attack in France or in Spain, holy shit, this is the worst thing that's ever happened. Just the way that this
even
is
if the numbers
and discussed in corporate media.
And even if the numbers, so let's say 12 people get killed by a terrorist attack in France or something, versus literally, and this is a real story, a few years ago, 300 people were killed in a single terror blast in Egypt. And it got essentially zero mainstream media coverage in Western press. But 12 people or 5, or something die in France or Britain, and it's 24/7 for several days.
Right. And yes, of course, there's a class, there's a poor versus rich aspect, obviously. And there were two Pakistani people on the submersible submarine. Yeah. What the fuck are we calling it?
A submersible.
Submersible. I don't know what the fucking difference is. Okay. Anyway,
there was a Pakistani, I believe, billionaire and his 19-year-old son.
And there were Pakistanis on the boat that capsized off the coast of Greece. And of course, the difference there, since they're all, these people that I'm mentioning were Pakistani, obviously that's the class structure. But we have to mention both class and race because it is a matter of class and race. If you don't pay attention to the racial aspect, then you are paying no attention to the systemic racism that exists in the global capitalist world. And yes, if this were a boat that capsized with a bunch of Ukrainians, you bet your fucking ass that there would be a lot more conversation about those poor blonde and blue-eyed people that died on that boat. You bet your ass, even if they were all poor Ukrainians as well. So we have to talk about both of those aspects when we're talking about these events. And there's also some points that I wanted to share that came from, I believe this was originally posted on World Socialist website, but Countercurrents reposted it, and they make the point that, I mean, they make a lot of good points, but let's see here. Hold, please.
Well, I'll just throw in here while you do that. Okay, excuse me, Jeopardy. You watch, we're going to get banned by YouTube for using copyrighted music. But the same can be said for missing children, usually in America. If you have a missing white girl, it often will get national coverage, depending on some factors. Again, not an exceedingly poor white girl, probably not, but they might make an exception. However, missing black child, essentially never. I mean, I don't know if anyone can even think of a time there was national coverage for a missing black child. So again, that's very race oriented. Now, there is some class structure as well. There's going to be a lot more coverage of a rich missing white girl than a poor missing white girl. But
so yes, to all that.
so, and yes.
I don't want to just be like, yeah, whatever he just said.
Wait, does that mean I won the Jeopardy question?
Yeah. What do we have?
What is missing black child?
So, this article points out that, for instance, just the rescue efforts involved, quote, saving the hundreds on board the fishing vessel near Greece, once they were clearly in jeopardy, would have been so much easier than rescuing a vessel possibly resting on the bottom of the sea for any government or naval force that desired to do so.
Oh my God, for $12 you could have had it. And I'm sure Greece doesn't have much of a military, but I bet you it's enough to go fetch those people out at sea.
So, and also the way that they're talking about it, you know, the implication of the reporting was that suffering refugees had brought the fate upon themselves. Whereas when you're talking about the people in the submersible, I mean, it's like, oh my God, those poor people, even though they, I mean, minus the 19-year-old, were like so gung-ho, they paid $250,000 to be there. But their fate is not resting on their shoulders. It's, oh my God, those poor people. Whereas, oh, it's the refugees' fault for getting on a boat, so they deserve to die.
Right. When of course they were pushed through awful circumstances to end up on that boat. No one jumps on a boat to go to a country they've never been to, that they're not sure will take them, that very well might imprison them, that might separate them from their family. No one does that for fucking kicks. There was no one on that boat that was like, I'm going to go see Greece. No, they did it out of either literal violent force or economic force, which is also a form of violence. But one of those two things forced them on that boat.
Right. And as this article also points out, their mass flight has largely been precipitated by the imperialist wars and other operations carried out by Western powers, the very regimes now presiding over their deaths at sea. No, again, like nobody gets on this boat because they're like, where I live is awesome. It's great. I'd love to stay. People do these desperate things because they don't have a choice, because their home places are destroyed, environmentally, economically, whatever. Nobody makes these trips because they're just looking for a joyride. And with that, I also just wanted to share, there's an organization called Alarm Phone, which is a hotline for folks, it says boat people in distress. They don't offer rescue, but they sound the alarm to the appropriate authorities. And they shared a timeline of what happened. And so I'm just going to read some of that so that people understand that this was extreme negligence. This was not, oh, the Greek authorities or European authorities had no fucking clue what was going on. They did. So this was posted on June 14th when the boat capsized. And it says that on June 13th, we, as an alarm phone, had alerted the Hellenic Coast Guard, Hellenic is Greek, at 4:53 p.m. to this boat in distress as the people had called us for help. The Greek authorities, also Italy and Malta, had already been alerted several hours earlier. Greek and other European authorities were thus well aware of this overcrowded and unseaworthy vessel. A rescue operation was not launched, and in the early hours of today, June 14th, the boat capsized. So that means that at 4:53 p.m., they received, and if you scroll down, you can see like the actual, so here's the actual timeline. So at 2:17, Alarm Phone receives the first call from the boat in distress. And then there's a timeline of another distressed call. And then they're trying to get their coordinates so that they can share that with the Greek Coast Guard. And then finally at 4:53 Central European Time, PM, they alert the Greek authorities. And they alert them via email, and they alert other actors, including Frontex and UNHCR Greece, which is UN, human rights arm of the UN, and nothing. So they knew. So like the early hours of June 14th, let's say it was, 2 a.m. From 5 p.m. to 2 a.m. the following day, nobody did fuck all, even though they were well aware 3 different official Italy, Greece, and Malta had been alerted to this boat in distress, and nobody did a goddamn fucking thing about it. And there are reports that in the hold of this boat, there were at least 100 children that are, at this point, almost definitely dead. There are roughly 78, 79 survivors, and none of them are children. So this is homicide. To get these distress calls and do fuck all about it is fucking homicide. And yes, it has to do with race. And yes, it has to do with class. It has to do with imperialism, the imperialism that is baked into Europe's history and present as it relates to Africa and the Middle East. This is absolute murder. And yet this information, what I just shared, which is not fucking difficult to find, is not being shared on any corporate media stations, showing how authorities, how Coast Guard authorities, whose job it is to save people at distress on the fucking ocean, did nothing about it. Nobody's fucking talking about this. The only thing that you can find on, if you Google shit, is like, how long does it take to die if your submersible implodes? Like, I don't fucking care. I mean, yes, bummer, but what the fuck? These people were murdered. 100 children were fucking murdered by imperialist powers who want to tighten their borders. And you're crying about fucking 4 billionaires. This is absolutely disgusting.
And the only way you get people to a point, meaning the citizens of Greece and Britain and France and all the Americans who don't care about this story, the only way you get people to a point where they will look past their own humanity and the humanity of the people on that boat and decide they don't matter. Like, it doesn't matter if those people die and are and drown and are killed. The only way you get them to that point is through a lot of social engineering, a lot of mainstream media propaganda, acting like those peoples don't care, and acting like, well, it was their own choice to get on that boat, and acting like, oh, well, we have a difficult time with our borders, so I guess just let those kids die out there. Like, it takes a lot of social engineering to make most people in a country ignore humanity like that, ignore that these are human beings. And there's not enough discussion, debate, talk at all about how egregious and fucking repulsive that social engineering is.
Absolutely. And I don't know if you can just share that article one more time.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to share. There's a screenshot. If you can, sorry, scroll down. There's a screenshot. It was also sent to NATO.
Oh, yeah.
Isn't NATO supposed to help?
750 people in distress near Kalamata. And this is copied to the UN, copied to NATO, copied to various offices at the UN.
And it points out 750 persons on board, including many women and children. It gives their position very clearly. Additional information, several people, among them some babies, are very sick.